I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from legacy IT that we're seeing as the buildings industry moves from more analog to digital and being from more disconnected to connected. Again, this is goodness. Like I look at this with eyes open and say, well, actually, there's a ton of best practice we can learn from, and we're all in the same boat, and we're all heading to the same place.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. Today we're joined by Carl Coken, VP of Atreus Engineering at Acuity Brands, and Sandeep Modhvadia, VP of Product at Acuity Brands. Together, they discuss new tools such as digital twins, machine learning, and open platforms that bridge the gap between legacy solutions and emerging technologies. They also delve into how building managers can integrate automated control, organizational alignment, and sustainability reporting to fully address energy and resource allocation. Now, let's get into it. Grow your career and expand your FM skills with the largest curated library of FM content. IFMA's knowledge library includes articles, case studies, research, videos, podcasts, webinars, templates, and more, all created and reviewed by industry experts from all around the world. Full members can access the library for free. Start reading today at knowledgelibrary.ifma.org.
So it looks like we're seeing a lot of interest in how customers are using technologies like digital twins to help manage their buildings. So you're the product guy, talking to the customers the most. Yeah. So what do you say? Right. I think the big thing is there is an expectation that everything is connected. And if everything is connected and there's data flowing off it, how do I make that data accessible and usable? And that's a universal problem. That's not just our industry. It's every industry. It's like everybody has their own idiosyncratic ways of generating data. By itself, that data is useful. But when you combine it and blend it with other data, like that's when that data starts to become invaluable, right? And that's when you start to be able to get integrated insights. And so, your point about the digital twin is really the combination of that, which is I have different streams of data coming in. How do I represent them in such a way that they become a facsimile of the real world so I can get aggregate understanding? And that is really what a digital twin is. It's like bringing all those different vectors of signals in, combining them and creating a representation online. Right. That's, being able to understand what the relationship is between all of the disparate pieces of data to know that what is happening is actually happening in the northwest corner of the second floor of this building in my portfolio of buildings. And that particular corner has offices and conference rooms, and then being able to understand what I should go do about it. The thing that I thought was always really interesting was during the pandemic, I think you showed me the data one time about how nobody's in the office, but their energy usage was still the same. And they never changed it because they didn't have the intelligence to understand the relationship between what was going on within the building to how they should relate that to their lighting and their heating or cooling. Yeah, the schedules were static. There was the assumption that every single day was the same. People got wise that, on the weekends, we don't have people in there. But again, it was a static schedule. Well, what happens? Next week's July 4th. It happens to be on a Tuesday and nobody changes the schedule because we didn't think about holidays. The schedules got, I would say, more informed over time, but they never got dynamic. And to your point, I want to know what's happening in the northwest corner of the building on the second floor. Well, can you imagine if it's because, on the third floor, I've got a bunch of furnaces heating up and all of a sudden that's impacting the second floor. Like it's that fidelity of information gives you more insight to be able to take action. And then you blend that with the real world understanding and you start to say, okay, hey, I haven't just got a facsimile. I've got a real living, breathing digital twin that represents what's happening in the real world. Yeah, I've got all that information. And then if you take it even a step further to air quality, I mean, out on the West Coast, like where you are now, if there are forest fires, you end up getting pretty poor air quality in the area. And you want to make sure that the air quality inside the building is safe for folks. And so if you know what the airflow is, where people are going to be in the building, how they're going to use the building, then you might be able to make better judgment calls on it. And so by understanding that relationship between where that air quality sensor is in the building, what the building looks like, and then maybe air quality outside the building and temperatures, then you have a whole lot better view and a better ability to make decisions. Because that's what you're talking about, right? Is it's all about how do you make better decisions?
Yeah. And the interesting about decision making is, the obvious ones are the ones we've spoken about right now is, hey, I want to operate my building. I want to make my building more efficient from a, energy consumption standpoint. We hear constantly about hybrid work and how that's changing how buildings are being used. So if you know how the building is being used, you can organize the building so you can make your people more productive and you get a better yield of out the people that are using the building as well. Or if it's a manufacturing facility and you get a sense of, okay, well, what are the hot zones versus the cold zones and how do you use that to fine tune output or yield? Or if it's a hospital and you're going to lead to better patient outcomes because different temperatures support different types of recovery or conditioning for a procedure. Like these are all different ways that a digital twin and having control over the building can help you run your organization more efficiently for better outcomes.
Well, and even if you add in things like just providing the information to folks, being able to report on energy usage in the building and where in the building that energy is occurring, and then also being able to feed that into their sustainability reporting. So now they get a better feel for what's going on so they can take the right action, so they can provide the information to the building manager, or if it's regulatory requirements, be able to provide that information up to the regulators as to how they're meeting the sustainability goals as well.
Yeah. And I think sustainability is just a great first step. Like obviously there's outside requirements that drive it. There may be, government requirements or just regulatory requirements, but from a very basic standpoint, you can't manage anything unless you can measure it and account for it. And sustainability is a great first step, right? Every customer says, well, I want to reduce my energy bill. I want to reduce my, energy consumption. Well, step one is just measuring what you're doing today. And I think that's a great starting point for anybody to be able to build their own sustainability or ESG roadmap is, okay, well, just don't worry about the complex stuff. Don't worry about SBTI goals or anything else. Just start with understanding what are you doing today? And that's a great first step. And that's a very easy step that most organizations can take with very little effort, but can, really start your journey off on the right foot.
Yeah. And part of what's required though is also being an open platform, right? The great thing about the digital twins, the digital twin standards for the ontologies out there, it enables you to go and build an open platform where you can bring in data from anybody's device. So, whatever the protocol happens to be, most likely it's that. But then also if you're trying to use other types of communication mechanisms for being able to interact with either IoT gateways and then, HVAC controllers, lighting controllers, being able to gather all of that data in one place, that's the big part of it is, is being able to pull the information in, make sense of it like we've been talking about, and then being able to report it out.
Absolutely. And I think the great thing is standards are becoming more robust and they're becoming more interoperable. You mentioned, whether it's, BACnet or, the protocols that are being used or whether it's industry standards and the ontologies like brick or haystack, whichever one you choose, you're ultimately not going to go wrong. It's important just to choose one. Because as soon as you choose one, at least that forces your data to start to become organized and usable and accessible. And I think that, again, that's a great first step. You can't manage what you don't measure. And, measurement may just be collecting the telemetry, making it usable. And, those insights start to come very quickly once you take those first few steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about the ontologies and leveraging those ontologies. What's great about also leveraging open standards like those ontologies or the protocols is that you get to take advantage of the rest of the industry. You don't have to be the one trying to drive it. You don't have to be the one trying to manage it. You can work with the rest of the industry to be able to pull that information in, to be able to set the standards so that it is accessible for everybody. Right? And then the other side of it is making sure that you can take that, once you've normalized the data, making it openly available to everybody else too.
And the great thing is, to your point, somebody else has done the heavy lifting. The standards are out there. They're really robust. They're very usable. There's choice in standards as well. There's interoperability between the standards. So there's no bad first step. If you just make a decision to go out there and start collecting that data, you'll be surprised at, how easy it is to do it now, given that infrastructure that's out there and available. but B, how quickly you figure out, what data works, what data doesn't work, and, where the gaps are. I kind of think of it like painting by numbers. Somebody's already built it. Or somebody has already put the outline there. Somebody's already put the numbers in there. You just got to start filling in those first couple gaps, and the picture will come to light pretty quickly. And where there's gaps, like, again, there's lots of help out there to help you complete it.
Right. And you're right, because it's really important, particularly for the folks that are managing a diverse portfolio of buildings, because each of those buildings probably were built by different people, designed by different folks. They implemented a different HVAC system than each other. They might have different controllers than the other. Depending upon when it was built, it might still be using analog controllers as opposed to digital controllers. And so being able to pull all that information in and being able to access all of it becomes much, much easier once you decided to leverage an open standard.
Absolutely. And that first step of my buildings are different sometimes scares people. My buildings aren't connected. It's scary. We're like, hey, I just have this, smorgasbord of different vendors and equipment and just stuff in there. I don't even know what's in there. Again, everybody's in the same boat. Like, there's nobody that has a complete, clean portfolio of buildings that are standardized with the same infrastructure at the same levels and connected. Like, it's even the most sophisticated organizations feel that same pain. And so it's like, there's a lot of company in the misery that most organizations feel, and that's good. We're all getting together.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think I told you about this. One of the folks in my team, they were out doing an implementation with a customer, and okay, now they had a mix of the different devices and the like to be able to pull the information in. But what they also found was that all of those devices happened to be on the IT network, on the corporate network. And what was funny was that the customer didn't even know that. So this building had been around for quite some time. It had been put in there. They started asking my guys, they're like, well, why did you do this? Like, we didn't do anything. We just started accessing the data and it happened to be on that network. But it helps to expose, here's where all the information's coming from. So now maybe they could take a little bit different approaches to, in this case, split it onto an OT network as opposed to, having it all combined on a single corporate backbone.
Yeah. And things like there's lessons that we can learn from the IT world, right? The IT world has dealt with this for many years. That point, like, do you segment your networks? Do you have different classifications of security or accessibility or responsibility? Like, there are best practices in adjacent workloads or industries, whatever domain, whatever you want to call it, that we can certainly draw from. And we certainly do that as we think about buildings, to your point around seeing a building and we couldn't audit it. We've seen organizations where customers said, hey, we physically can't connect these devices to the internet because we don't know how, or we don't know what infrastructure we have. And it's better to just keep things blocked from the internet and leave things disconnected and vulnerable. Well, you're still vulnerable and you still have other types of threats that can attack you from the inside. And so, just shutting off the internet makes things better. Or the other one, which is interesting, which is like, oh, well, we thought these things were not connected to the internet, but turns out they are because somebody went and bought mobile modems and sell, mobile hotspots and connected them that way because they needed to update them for whatever reason. So, I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from legacy IT that we're seeing as the buildings industry moves from more analog to digital and being from more disconnected to connected. Again, this is goodness. Like, I look at this with eyes open and say, well, actually, there's a ton of best practice we can learn from, and we're all in the same boat and we're all heading to the same place.
You're absolutely right. One of the things that I've always equated what we're doing with these digital twin ontologies is we're creating something similar to what the DMTF did with the carbon information model for managing network devices. So same general concept. So you're able to understand what devices are connected to what those devices are made up of, and then being able to understand the information that's coming from them it's certainly very different, but the same kind of concept. So you're right. I mean, you can take the concepts from the network management world or even enterprise applications or some other parts of the industry and be able to leverage that knowledge, that expertise to be able to better manage and better provide information back.
I think one of the things that's really interesting that's coming out is, everybody wants to do something with AI, right? Like I can't read an article without hearing about AI. I can't get a resume without everybody claiming to be now an AI expert. But, AI in my mind really comes down to three things. One is you need domain experience. Like AI without domain experience doesn't help you anywhere. You obviously need to build the right algorithms, the right models to be able to do something. But then third piece is the data. Again, I think it's one of these really interesting things is we've historically looked at having data to have understanding, but now data can help build knowledge and build wisdom from an IT perspective and ultimately intelligence. And, I'm curious as you think through the data that we're collecting, like how does that data feed into AI ambitions?
Oh, it's fun because you're right. Collecting all of this data allows us to get all these disparate points. But once we've got that information, it allows us to understand patterns and being able to understand either it's patterns of how people are working inside of a building, or it's patterns based on what's going on with the weather related to the building. So being able to understand patterns is how you basically build your model, your inference model. Now, yeah, using an LLM or using some other technology, yeah, it depends, right? It depends on what we're trying to accomplish. And for us, all of that data is really going to help us to be able to determine which usage is right. So, an LLM might be good for being able to make it easier for people to ask questions of the environment, to understand, all right, if I went and did something, what would happen? Or help me understand what's going on with this particular building at this point in time. But then you want to be able to take the next step, which is I'd like to automate. I'd like to be able to go from, I understand that it's going to be, 95 degrees outside. My building faces west and it's got lots of big windows, and a bunch of people want to be having a meeting on that side of the building at 2 PM when it's going to be the hottest time of the day. What do you do? Right? Do you go and increase airflow? It's not always about, do I decrease temperatures? Can I increase the airflow over there? And be able to do that in an automated fashion without having to have an interaction with a person. So the big thing for us is being able to do that, being able to understand that, something happened, it's July 4th, or, it's not July 4th, it's July 3rd, but we decided to make that a company holiday, but nobody's in the office. So if nobody's in the office, I shouldn't bring the lights on. I shouldn't start cooling the building, and do that based on what I'm seeing in terms of occupancy of the building, as opposed to just, I've got a very simplistic schedule view of the world. Right. And then the next steps are the same, right? It's all right. What else do I want to go and do? If I've got an understanding of, you come into the building, you and your team come into the building at 10 o'clock in the morning versus 8 o'clock in the morning. I want to do something different with the building. I want to have lighting to be different than I would otherwise. So all of those things can help to save a bunch of energy for the customer, help them get to the sustainability goals, but also make decisions a whole lot quicker and make it based off of a broad set of data as opposed to just a very finite set of data.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because you think about the technology stack, there's obviously intelligent controllers at the edge living in the building. You've got these like huge cloud services in the sky, data centers galore. How should we think about the AI capabilities, where they live? What does the ideal state look like?
Yeah. So ideally, what you're doing, you're collecting the data at the edge. You're doing some summarization and aggregation of the data. In the long term, what you really want to be able to do is have created a set of models and then push the model down to a device locally, so that local edge device can run some set of models based off of the information that it's getting. Certainly passing the information up, do the learning and changing of the models up in the cloud, but have the model actually working down at the edge. But also you want to have the flexibility. If you don't have a controller that has the capacity to run the model, it can't do it at a reasonable amount of time, then sure, send the data up to the cloud, send up what you need, and then go ahead and take the action and trigger the action down locally. But ideally, you've got a master controller there that's got enough capacity to be able to run those models and run those and make the decisions locally. And then also be able to provide the information to the site manager. as opposed to having to wait for somebody at corporate headquarters to go do something. The site managers go on a different view or a different set, and also give them the opportunity to be able to override it if they need to.
So the override point is interesting because when we think about AI, trust and the reliability, like, its system, can I trust it, comes into play. How do you help people feel comfortable with the fact that, an AI is now powering your building? There's hundreds or thousands of people in the building. Building's my safety net, but now I'm going to trust it to a computer. Like, how do we help people feel comfortable with that?
Yeah. And so I think part of it is starting them with, here's the action we recommend you take. Hit this button if you want to take that action. So that they still have that control and they can see what it is and they can feel comfortable that, okay, I'm the one still in control of it. And then over time, that will make them feel more comfortable that, yes, the decisions that the system is making, the recommendations that it's making are the correct ones. And then I can feel comfortable with just telling it, go ahead and do those on your own. Just notify me that you made the change. And so I think that's the baby step for some folks, is set it up with the flexibility to be able to enable them to say, yeah, you gave me this recommendation. I'm still going to have the human push the button to take the action. And then over time, all right, yep, every one of those makes sense. Let me just let it go. And I trust it now to be able to do that on its own. If somebody feels really comfortable up front, then yeah, sure, just let it run that way on its own automatically up front. But I think most folks will want to have the final say so on taking action themselves first, at least for a little while.
Okay, so you told me I'm getting C3PO before I'm getting the Terminator.
Hopefully it never gets to Skynet.
All right. So, and so it's an interesting point. So we're going to feel good about the AI. We feel good about the technology. I've got, C3PO there being like my personal AI tuned building. How far are we away from this becoming a reality?
I really don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's more than, if we put our minds to it, the next couple of years should be achievable to have something that is able to make the recommendations for the customers on what they should be doing with their buildings and be able to do that fairly, in a very intelligent manner. And then if they're comfortable with it, allowing the system to go ahead and do what it needs to go do.
So we're a lot closer to the autonomous building than we are the autonomous car.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. I think the autonomous car, what's funny is that if you think about all the electronics and all of the number of processors that are in a car right now, there's thousands in a car, and that there's probably more in a car than there are in a typical building these days. But the decisions that you have to make for a building are not as necessarily as complex as they have to do for an autonomous car. You're not having to worry about, somebody just randomly stepping off the curb while they're looking at their phone in front of a car, doing that in front of a building. Don't care. Building's not going to move. So the decision-making process doesn't have to be the same. And it's not necessarily as complex as that for a car.
It's super interesting to hear the comparison between, vehicles and buildings. A lot of people think about AI, think about self-driving cars, but, the self-maintaining, self-healing, self-operating building is probably something that's going to impact more people sooner, just given how tangible it is. So, really interesting stuff. Well, Carl, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this and, talk about this topic with me. If you'd love to learn more, I'm Sandeep Modhvadia. Find me on LinkedIn. Find me at atrius.com. Carl?
I'm Coken and Sandeep. As always, it's great chatting with you. Again, find me on LinkedIn.com or at atrius.com, where you can learn more about what we're doing to make this dream a reality.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.